What is the fig tree in the Bible? Is it Israel? Or is it the kingdom of heaven, kingdom of God? Let's take a look at some Old Testament references, then we'll come back to them later in this video. Zechariah 3 verse 9. For behold, the stone that I have laid before Joshua, upon one stone shall be 7 eyes. Behold, I will engrave the graving thereof, saith the Lord of hosts, and I will remove the iniquity of that land in 1 day. Verse 10. In that day, saith the Lord of hosts, shall ye call every man his neighbor under the vine, and under the fig tree. Zechariah 4 verse 1. And the angel that talked with me came again, and waked me as a man that is wakened out of his sleep. In verse 2 and 3 of Zechariah 4, the writer went on to describe the candlestick being golden, which represents deity, and the 2 olive trees which are to be the anointed ones as described in verse 14. I submit to you that this is the picture of when Jesus is in the land and reigning as king. He will have 2 anointed ones with him. They could be 2 peoples, Judah and Israel, or maybe Jews and proselytes in the ancient days. Much can be left to speculation in this area. It is probably not incidental that the writer mentioned he was awakened out of sleep, an appropriate parallel to realizing what is to come and what is required of his people. However, what is of note is that in verse 6, the writer states that all this shall only happen by his Spirit, and not by power nor by might. I'll leave you to interpret what it means. Looking at events in the Middle East now. Before we continue, I would suggest to you to pause and go to Isaiah chapter 5 and have a read. It describes the relationship between God and Israel, and what shall happen in the end times. In verse 7 of that chapter, the vineyard is described as the house of Israel, and the men of Judah his plant of delight. I'm paraphrasing here. Therefore, now we know the agricultural product of grapes or the vineyard is Israel. The parable of the fig tree. Matthew 24 verse 32 to 35. We learn in chapter 24 the passage is a description of the second coming of Christ. Upon his coming we have established that the millennial kingdom will be set up. The fig tree parable is also found in Mark 13 verse 28 to 31, and Luke 21 verse 29 to 33. We would like to take note that only in Luke 21 verse 31 is the kingdom of God being described as near at hand, which cements the millennial reign being the status of Israel the fig tree, or under the fig tree. We have instances in the Bible when Israel has been described as different types of trees, such as vineyard, figs and olive trees, and even myrtle trees in Zechariah. For a quick understanding, the olive trees described Israel in the Old Covenant, where they also had access to God through the prophets and priests. And wild olives are proselytes at that time. Read Romans chapter 11 with this template, and you would see what Paul was contending with them about the Messiah. However, this requires a bit of right division doctrine to fully understand. So, why the parable of the barren fig tree? In Luke 13 verse 6 to 9, he spake also this parable: a certain man had a fig tree planted in his vineyard, and he came and sought fruit thereon, and found none. Then said he unto the dresser of his vineyard, Behold, these 3 years I come seeking fruit on this fig tree, and find none. Cut it down. Why cumbereth it the ground? And he answering said unto him, Lord, let it alone this year also, till I shall dig about it, and dun it. And if it bear fruit, well. And if not, then after that thou shalt cut it down. God had foreseen what the response of Israel would be, therefore their dispensation had to be put to a halt. In Romans 11 verse 11, Paul described God had to institute a program for the Gentiles to provoke Israel, and so the story goes. The kingdom of heaven, with Jesus as the king, had to be delayed. If you don't a kingdom, you don't need a king. Coming back to Zechariah 3 verse 9 to 10. In that day, saith the Lord of hosts, shall ye call every man his neighbor under the vine, and under the fig tree. This verse is now seen more clearly in context, taking the parables of the fig tree in the New Testament 3 books, in that Israel is a nation being born again in 1 day, and during the summer being at hand. Why summer? Well, the 3 summer feasts of the Lord haven't been completed. Yom Kippur, the trumpets and tabernacles. Yom Kippur being the day that iniquity is removed, and born again as described to Nicodemus. So, what do you think? Is 1948 the fig tree coming back to life? I hope you enjoyed this video.